What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from Mtg. We like it a magic, and today I got some of them sweet, hot, buttery Theros Beyond Death spoilers for you. I know why you come. You want some of that Henry David Theros action, so let's do that. We got a bunch of cards to look at today, and some of them are draft chaff. Some of them are kind of weird. You know, they have strange applications, but sometimes those are the most scintillating cards to look at. But then there's also a bunch of cards that I think are like standard playable day one. So pretty nice little mixed bag. Let's start with Arcana Falling Stars, the final card from last night. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 white for a 4/4 flying Archon, and when it dies, you may return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. This starts a little trend at the beginning of the videos of cards that I think are really good. In limited specifically, but aren't going to see any standard play whatsoever. I mean, I shouldn't have to really expand beyond that because 6 mana is an awful lot of mana in a constructed format, but in limited, this is really fantastic. It gives you a big flying beater that if it does die, you're probably going to get like a creature back from your graveyard because a lot of creatures are enchantments. Or maybe you get a saga back or something. You know, there's all kinds of options, and you're almost guaranteed to get value if Archon does die, so you punish your opponent for killing it. If they don't kill it, they die. So really good in limited. And I like it there, but obviously I don't really see it seeing too much standard play. And there's a few cards like that today, like Saprophage Harpy. I don't know if that's the actual name. That's just sort of the translation we've got going now. So I don't know what a saprophage is, but maybe it's a real thing. This is 2 black and a 2/1 Harpy that has flying. And when it ETBs, you exile target card from an opponent's graveyard. This is, I guess, again, limited playable. I mean, you get a fairly costed flying creature. It's kind of a Windrake with 1 less toughness, and those are usually playable, in sealed especially, but limited at large. And this is going to, you know, snipe an escape card out of the graveyard or something, or maybe keep them off of being able to escape something later. So, you know, every little bit counts, and it's got a decent body in limited, but again, that's the only place you're going to be seeing this card. Same thing with Shimmerwing Chimera here. You know, this is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a 3/2 enchantment creature. It's a Chimera with flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you return up to 1 other target enchantment you control to its owner's hand. So there might be some cool combos with this in limited. Just return an enchantment to your hand that has some sort of ETB effect, whether it's a creature or an Omen. We're about to look at some more Omens, and all of those have ETB triggers and stuff, so this might play really well with them, and again, give you a serviceable flying Deuterino in the air ski there. So that, you know, is probably really good and limited, but again, is way too overcosted for any constructed format pretty much ever. So let's look at Omen of the Sun, which looks a little bit more playable than some of the cards we've looked at today, and it goes really well with Shimmerwing Chimera. But this is Omen of the Sun, 3 mana, 2 and white for an enchantment with flash, and when it ETBs, you create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, and you gain 2 life. And you can pay 2 and a white and sack Omen to scry 2. You can do that with pretty much all of these Omens. They all appear to have flash and some sort of activated ability that lets you sacrifice them to scry. So that's all really good utility, especially in a format where you need to have enchantments not only on the battlefield, but sometimes in the graveyard, you know. Whether for specific cards that want enchantments in the graveyard, or just to escape stuff, you might want to sacrifice this. So great way to fix your draws in the mid to late game and give you a little bit of board presence. But again, I think this is mostly just limited playable, especially at 3 mana. I don't necessarily want to pay 3 for my Raise the Alarm. Even if I can sacrifice it to scry 2 later, I'm not sure that it's entirely standard playable, although it does give, you know, another chance, another way for the tokens decks to just, you know, interact at instant speed and play at instant speed in the first place. So it's at least interesting, but I don't really think it breaks the barrier. That said, it looks really good in limited. And if there are any sort of tertiary enchantment strategies in standard that really want to play white, this might be something to look into, but at the end of the day, I'm just not sure how much value it actually creates for you. So let's look at a couple of sagas here that I think are really difficult to evaluate, honestly. First of all, here's the Triumph of Anax. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red, and it has 4 chapters, which is kind of interesting. But on chapters 1, 2, and 3, until end of turn, target creature gains trample and gets +X/+0, where X is the number of lore counters on the Triumph of Anax. And then on chapter 4, target creature you control fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Now, is this all worth 3 mana? I'm not 100% sure. You have to skip a turn, basically, to play this card, and you really don't get a whole lot of value on the first turn that you play it, although you do get to give a big creature trample, and +1/+0 for what that's worth, but trample might actually be really attractive, an undersung part of this card, because there's going to be a lot of times in the late game where you're trying to push a creature through, and Trample's a great way to sort of get a little bit of extra reach, pseudo evasion on a creature to get that extra few points of damage through. So Trample on 3 turns in a row towards your biggest guy, and the boost gets bigger and bigger as time goes on. Yeah, I could see that being really good. I mean, you get basically 4 free spells here, and eventually it becomes a removal spell. So it's just insanely limited playable, but I'm not really sure that it's going to see really any play in Constructed at the end of the day. It's just, I'm not sure that it's going to be worth 3 mana, even in decks that want it. So I'm going to move on to the other saga that I think might be better. There's a lot more people freaking out about this one, at least. This is the first Ironian Games, again, loose translation. It's going to be, I can't wait to edit this. Translating a 4-chapter saga is going to be real fun. But this is 2 and a green for a saga. And on chapter 1, you create a 1/1 human soldier token. And then on turn 2, or chapter 2, you put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. In chapter 3, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, you draw 2 cards. That's a good chapter. And in chapter 4, you create a gold artifact token. Now, these have existed before. Gold is just basically a treasure token. Sacks for any color of mana, but you don't have to tap it. That's literally the only difference between gold and treasure. So that's not terrible. You get a little bit of ramp, but you have to wait a bunch of turns to get that ramp. That said, this might be like halfway decent in sacrifice decks, because it gives you a couple of different sacrifice fodders. You get a 1/1 human off of it the first turn, so at least it doesn't do nothing. You get a body off of it. But 3 mana for 1/1's not great. And then later you get a gold that you can sacrifice for more value from Mayhem Devil or Corvold or whatever. So seems at least somewhat decent, but I'm not sure that the sacrifice decks want to make room for a card like this, honestly. Putting 3 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control is kind of sweet. I could see putting that on Questing Beast or something like that, or any trample creature for what that's worth, and just really going to town. Now, the 3rd chapter is the one that I'm most excited about, but it's really disruptible all in all. The card is self-contained in that it creates a token, and then next turn it can basically make a 4/4, put the 3 counters on the token. And then the next turn, that creature that you created on chapter 1 will draw you 2 cards, but that's obviously really easy to disrupt. Your opponent gets multiple turns to do so. It's really bad against board wipes and stuff, so I'm just not sure that this is really standard playable. Maybe, but it's kind of a stretch in my mind. I think there's just way better options for just about any deck that runs green. I mean, it's the most powerful color in standard Magic right now, even after the bannings. So I'm not sure you'll find the slots for this in a lot of your green decks. But prove me wrong, this is really good green card advantage that also makes a big creature. So all the chapters are good, but it's really slow. And again, you can see it coming from a mile away. Your opponent has multiple turns to do something about it, so I'm just not sure. So I'm going to move on here. But I'm not actually sure to what. Do I want to talk about Dawn Evangel next? Let's talk about Pious Wayfarer. We'll save Evangel for a second. Pious Wayfarer is just 1 white mana for a human scout. It's a 1/2 with Constellation. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 till end of turn. I actually really like this thing, kind of a lot. Obviously, if you're playing enchantment creatures, then on turn 2, you're just going to give this thing the bonus, right? You can just swing for 2. And that's actually really aggro. You got a 2/3 that you're swinging on turn 2. That's not bad. Also note that if you have instant speed auras like these Omens and whatnot, then you can boost this as effectively a combat trick, which is really, really sweet too, especially in the limited environment. But I imagine even in some standard, decks. Because if you've got almost nothing but enchantments in your deck, and it kind of sucks that Pious Wayfarer is not an enchantment creature. I would love to go turn 1 Wayfarer, turn 2 double Wayfarer. Swing whatever it is at that point 3 seems pretty decent. But in any enchantment based deck where you're just dropping 2 enchantments a turn past turn 1, this could actually be really strong and a great way to get your board presence going. So I like that. I like it an awful lot. Also, if there's a bunch of cards that are not only enchantments, but maybe create enchantment tokens. Can we get that? That would, at some point in history, that would be pretty good. Note that you can play this in Pauper too, so there might be some fun shenanigans there. It's just a really sweet aggro creature that comes at at least a decent rate to begin with. It can block a bunch of, 1/1s, and that's actually kind of valuable right now. So I don't mind it. in terms of just raw stats, but if you just give it +1/+1 even once a turn, it gets really good, but anything beyond that, it gets amazing. Plus, imagine this in like All That Glitters or something, you know, that would be a pretty decent combo there. So I like a lot about Wayfarer, a lot. I think it's a great utility creature for any enchantment-based deck that's looking to get a little aggro, you know? So big fan of this is all I can say, and I think there's, you know, it's a lot more, it's a lot cooler than it looks at first glance, but... Let's move on. Do I finally want to do Dawn Evangel? Yeah, let's talk about Dawn Evangel. Dawn Evangel is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/3 enchantment creature. It's a human cleric. And whenever a creature dies, if an aura you controlled was attached to it, you return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So note that the way this is worded, it's just whenever a creature dies. So if you cast a Dead Weight or a Mire's Grasp or something like that on an opponent's creature and that creature dies, well then you can reanimate one of your own small creatures, which is really, it's actually a really, really good application to the card, you know, or if like you put a pacifism on something and then that creature dies, then, well, again, you get a creature back. And there's all kinds of cool stuff you can do, like Charming Prince, obviously, is a pretty good 2-drop to recur over and over. So it kind of all starts there, but there's all kinds of stuff, Tithe Taker and whatnot, you can recur. Even like stupid Orzhov stuff, you know, you got Cruel Celebrant, Corpse Knight, you know, there's all kinds of fun stuff you might be able to reanimate with this. So big fan of Dawn Evangel, but I don't think it's going to break through the ceiling into like actual tier 1 or 2 standard play. I'm not sure it's that good, but it is a nice little recursive element that we can use a couple of ways. Like I haven't even talked about Commander yet, you know. If this is a really long way to go in Commander because it's like I think a 4 or 5 card combo, but at least, you know, here's the dream. If you have an aura like say if the creature dies, the Rancor comes back to your hand, so does, you know, another creature. And you can play that creature and put the Rancor on it and just kind of repeat this process over and over as many times as you have mana for. As long as you have like a sacrifice outlet, Ashnod's Altar or something like that, you can just sacrifice like an Ornithopter over and over with a Rancor on it. Get the Rancor back over and over. Play the Ornithopter for free because you're recurring the Ornithopter every time it dies. You can't do that. Just play the Ornithopter for free, pay 1 mana for the Rancor, put it on the Ornithopter, sacrifice it, rinse, repeat, for only 1 mana per cycle in this iteration. So if you've got literally anything that does, you know, damage when creatures die or damage when creatures enter the battlefield, anything like that, or maybe, you know, something that creates tokens whenever a creature enters the battlefield, there's all kinds of ways to sort of exploit this basic engine. But just another thing to get excited about with Dawn Evangel, but it's going to be tough to pull that off, obviously, even in Commander. So, but at least it's a thought. But let's move on here because I've talked way too much about a probably bulk uncommon. Let's look at Callaphy, Beloved of the Sea. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue for a legendary enchantment creature that's a demigod, and it's a star 3. Now, its power, that star, is equal to your devotion to blue, so it's at least a 2/3. And creatures and enchantments you control have spells your opponents cast that target this permanent cost 1 more to cast. So that's at least decent, but I don't like that its toughness is stuck at 3. Not a big fan of that, but you know, I've played, what is it, Shambling Suit or something like that. It's the 3 mana artifact that's, you know, power is equal to the number of artifacts and enchantments in play. I've played that in like janky budget decks before, so I could see maybe playing this. I mean, its power can get really, really big after just a couple of turns, so it's not terrible, and obviously it's tough to kill because it's both a creature and enchantment. But I mean, it's only going to cost your opponent 1 extra, just for the record, to target this. But at least it's a little bit tougher to target, and it makes all of your other stuff tougher to target. So maybe it's worth the 3 mana investment. Maybe it gets huge over the course of the game. But the 3 toughness really puts me off this card for a lot of the intents and purposes that you might have for it. So let's look at Omen of the Forge coming up next. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for an enchantment with flash. And when it ETBs, it deals 2 damage to any target. You can pay 2 in red and sack it to scry 2 like all the other Omens. And this, again, I like, you know, I don't necessarily love paying 2 mana for a shock, and if I'm going to do that, I'm probably just going to play Bone Crusher Giant 90% of the time, which kind of puts me off this. But again, if there's any decks with red in them that really want to exploit enchantment synergies, and this obviously goes straight in, because I mean, you could do worse than 2 mana for 2 to a target at instant speed with the ability to scry later, which red decks might actually want a lot of the time. So I'm not too down on the card, but I think there's probably a lot better stuff to do in most red decks. But then again, if there is a deck based around enchantment synergy, this probably goes in, given that that deck plays red, and it might not. Right? A lot of the enchantment synergies look to be, Abzan at this point. So let's move on to starting to get into some really good stuff here today. Let's look at the Phoenix. Let's look at the Phoenix of Ash, which has really, really cool arts. It's like a smoke buzzard. It's pretty awesome. But this is 3 mana, 1 and 2 red for a 2/2 flying haste. It's got the creature type Phoenix. You can pay 2 and a red, and Phoenix of Ash gains +2/+0 until end of turn. You can escape this for 2 and 2 red and exile 3 other cards from your graveyard, and Phoenix escapes with a +1/+1 counter on it, which is, that's pretty good. This can come back a few times a game, too, because 3 isn't really a high escape cost, especially in the decks that want to play this, mono red spells or Izzet spells or something like that. I'm going to fill their graveyard with spells super fast, and it's going to be worth it to them to recur this in 2-3 times in a game. So I can see this in some sort of Arclight Phoenix strategy, Crackling Drake and all that, but at some point you're playing too many creatures in that deck, so I'm not even sure you can play 4 of this, but I do think this has a home, but whether or not it makes that deck tier 1 by itself, I kind of highly doubt that part of the equation. But at the same time, I do think that the card has like a pretty high level of playability. It's really difficult to deal with forever, so I like it an awful lot. I really do. As much as Ziggy is protesting right now, I think that this is actually a sweet Phoenix, and 3 cards is not too much to ask whatsoever, especially considering, you get a 3/3 flying haste when you do escape it. That can pump. I haven't even really talked about that. I won't talk about it much, but the ability to pump this in the late game is actually kind of huge. But let's move on here to Thassa. We finally got to Thassa. This is 4 mana, 3 and a blue for a 6/5 legendary enchantment creature that's a god and has indestructible, because that's how we play this game. And as long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa's not a creature. Again, that's how these are designed. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 other target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. You can pay 3 and a blue to tap another target creature. So a lot of fun to be had with this thing, right? You can just, flicker a creature every single turn, and that can be broken in a million different ways. We've got Yarok in this format, and this is sort of on color for Yarok, but even in like a mono blue deck, there's stuff you can do with this, but there's a ton of creatures on the curve below this that you can blink. What you want to do is play a creature on turn 3 and then play this on turn 4, blink it at the end step. Like a Risen Reef is a pretty good example. Maybe the best example, actually, in standard of what you could be doing with Thassa. I really do like this mana sink. You can tap creatures down either so they can't attack you or so you can get through for combat damage, and that might prove to be really broken. I've seen people talk about, this plus Verity Circle, which is just cute. It's very cute, but honestly, I think the card is just kind of decent self-contained. It doesn't necessarily need too many other pieces to make it a decent card. But let's move on. We've only got 3 more cards to talk about today. Let's look at Haktos the Unscarred. That's a great name. It's 2 red mana and 2 white mana for a 6/1 legendary human warrior, and it attacks each combat if able. And when it enters the battlefield, you choose 2, 3, or 4 at random. There's that terrible word. Haktos has protection from each converted mana cost other than the chosen number. So one thing I want to note about this is that it doesn't just have protection from, let's say you roll a 3, and it has protection from, everything but 3. Well, that doesn't mean it just has protection from 2 and 4. It also has protection from 1 converted mana cost stuff, 5, 6, and 7 converted mana cost stuff. So it's literally only not immune to 1 thing. It's a take on Achilles. I'm pretty sure that's the flavor here, and a very, very good flavor. But in any case, this is actually pretty sweet looking, but it's really random, and again, I don't like random in constructed Magic where so much is dependent on reliability and consistency, and you just can't really have that with a Haktos. If they've got a questing beast out, you better hope you don't roll 4 or something. It's just, I don't know. I really, really hate the word random on this. I also think that attacking each combat of Fable is like a huge trap on this card. It doesn't have any form of trample. You look at the stats, 6-1, and you're like, oh, this is kind of a ball of lightning. Not really. Not really, but it does represent a really fast clock if they don't happen to have the answer to it at that time. And I think that's probably the best part of the card. So I want to throw that out there, but let's move on to Timaret, Chosen from Death. One of the cards that I'm like low-key most excited about from today. This is 2 black mana for a legendary enchantment creature demigod with 2-star power and toughness, and the star is equal to your devotion to black. You can pay 1 and a black and exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. You gain 1 life for each creature card exiled this way. So I actually really like this. A lot of folks saying that it's kind of ho-hum, but honestly, it's playable. If only because we needed another creature that has 2 black pips as a 2-drop for the Gary deck, the Grey Merchant of Asphodel deck. We know that's going to be a deck in the upcoming standard. And we really needed at least 1 more creature that cost 2, and both of those mana symbols were black. So this could literally be like the text box could be more or less blank. It would still be like a fairly playable 2-drop in the upcoming standard, but the text box is actually pretty good. You go this into Ayara or something, and suddenly this guy's huge. The toughness is 5, so it can block pretty much anything. And if you got like a 1-drop, a cat or a Knight of the Ebon Legion or something, and suddenly it has 6 toughness when you drop your Ayara. Deathless Knight, I should point that out too. Deathless Knight is 4 black pips for devotion, so suddenly this thing is 2/6 if all you have is Timaret and Deathless Knight. Plus, Deathless Knight will interact with the life gain that Timaret can give you. So, woof, like that seems like a good little self-contained combo right there. Plus, the second ability, the exile 2 cards from graveyards and gain some life, that's not a bad ability. It's kind of scavenging oozy too, and that's proven to be pretty decent in multiple formats. Although Timaret doesn't necessarily grow when you use that ability, it still gains a little bit of life, and that can keep you in the game. And push escape cards out of graveyards, jumpstart cards too. Anything your opponent might want to reanimate. Just really hostile to any graveyard strategies, and I really like that. So I think Timaret's actually a very standard playable creature. I've seen some have the take that like Daxos is the better 2-mana demigod. I'm not sure about that. I think this is way better, especially in the format that we're about to sail into, where graveyards are going to matter a lot more. This activated ability is very real, and it's going to be decent in the Orzhov life gain decks, maybe even, because those decks have a fairly high devotion to black count. And just the ability to get Timaret to 4, 5, 6 toughness as a 2-drop is going to be really, really nice. So, big fan. Huge fan, actually. And I think that, as an upgrade to Yarik's Finlurker in the Devotion deck, we could have gotten a lot worse and still played the card. So I love it. But the final card I want to talk about today, the one that I'm most excited about at least, is another black card. This is Erebos' Intervention. This is X and a black for an instant. Choose 1. Target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn. You gain X life. And the other mode is exile up to twice X target cards from graveyards. So this is main deckable graveyard hate right here, ladies and gentlemen. This is really, really decent, just like Timaret is main deckable graveyard hate. This too, if you have to use a second mode on it, is actually really sweet, because twice X means that if you're just paying like 2 for X, you're getting rid of like 4 cards from graveyards, which is a lot. If your opponent is relying on literally anything that I've mentioned a million times before, escape, reanimation, jumpstart, whatever, then this is going to completely, screw over their plans. So sometimes the second mode is going to be worth playing on this, but the first mode is especially delicious. Now, it does cost you 4 mana to kill like a 3 toughness creature, which is kind of a lot, but it's instant speed, which really makes the difference here. Instant speed is a big deal, not only because you can play it in response to your opponent trying to fiddle with stuff in the graveyard. You can use the second mode to knock out any targets when they cast a spell. So that's important, but also the first mode is amazing because it's instant speed. You can save up all your mana, hold up for a counter spell or something like that if your opponent doesn't play anything, or if they swing with a big creature. Well, suddenly you can dump all your mana into this and not only kill their questing beast, but like gain 4 life. That seems really good to me. I've always liked stuff like this, Tendrils of Corruption and Corrupt itself. Cards like that are always like favorites of mine in black, and this feels very much like one of those, and it scales really well into the late game. If you top deck it late, and suddenly it doesn't even matter if you're killing like a 3/3 or something, you can still gain like 8 life off of this. That seems great, especially in a format that has access to so much potent ramp. This could gain you a ton of life and really just turn the corner in one card. You know, get rid of their 5/5, get rid of their god. It's worth noting too that this gives creatures -X/-X, so it kills indestructible creatures. So this is tech against gods, and even if you have to dump a bunch of mana into it, dump 6 mana into it to kill a 6 toughness god, you still gain 6 life, and if that didn't turn the corner, I don't know what else is going to. So I really, really like this thing. Love the instant speed on it, love the malleability and versatility of it, and just the fact that, like, you're going to main deck it almost no matter what. I'm not sure how many copies you play, but you know, just killing a questing beast, gaining 4 life is good enough, especially at instant speed. But against other decks, it's got even more utility. So, big fan of this. I've always got like kind of a hard on for removal. So, I'm a huge fan of this thing. And I think it might not be like a 4 of card or anything, but there's going to be some control decks that play at least like a 1 or 2 of this, and it's going to be a really important piece in the toolbox. So huge fan, and I've just reloaded Mythic Spoiler. I don't see anything else from today. Just let me know if I missed something. I have got to get a sip of a drink. I sound completely different than my actual voice. Hold on. Much better. Much better already. There I am. Anyway, I guess I'm done for this one. So just let me know what you thought like the most impactful cards from today were. And, you know, as usual, how you felt about my takes. Some of these are really, really difficult to evaluate. Maybe I'm missing something, or an interaction of some kind. Triumph of Annex and the first Aronian games, or whatever it's called, the Green Saga. I'm really interested in your takes on those. Haktos, did I miss something on that? Is it better than I'm giving it credit for? Thassa, the Phoenix. I want to know about the Phoenix, the 3-red Phoenix. Is that as good as I think it is? Or, you know, how do you feel? Just a lot of opinions, even Dawn Evangel. You know, are the combos real with that, or is it just kind of chaff? You know, a lot of I love days like this of spoilers where there's not a whole bunch of like slam dunk, guaranteed to be playable, super powerful cards, or a bunch of like garbage cards. You know, these are all cards that are relatively difficult to evaluate on some level or another. So really want to know your opinions on these. Let me know how you felt in the comments section. Like the video. Means a lot to me, and do all the other YouTube stuff. You know, check the link in the description to go to TCG Player, pre-order any of this stuff, or just look at prices. It can be a pretty valuable resource around this time of year to just see what things are going for. But you can also check the link in the description to go to Patreon or patreon.com/SBMTG. Check out the stuff there. You know, just $1 a month will let you vote on what decks you want to see first when we go to Deck Tech season for Theros Standard. That's a pretty good game. And $1 a month helps like tremendously. So, you know, if all my subscribers gave me $1 a month, we could do ridiculous stuff on this channel like you wouldn't believe. So if you got it, throw it my way. If you don't, I understand. Either way, I just appreciate you watching this far into the video. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you doing? You should subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications so you know when I put content out. And yeah, pretty sure that's all the pitching I have to do for this one. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind. Especially, geez, everything going on in the world right now. Please, geez, spread love and be kind.